So you know how when somebody knocks down some dominoes, right? And it goes all the way through and the last domino falls. How is it that you find who knocked the dominoes down in the first place? Reason would dictate that you follow the trail of dominoes all the way back to the beginning and you'll find that incriminating finger. That finger that knocked them all down in the first place. And that's who you blame. Happy quarantine, everyone. A lot of the conversation is focusing on how much time did the rest of the world have? How much time did Donald J. Trump have in order to react to this virus? Was he as prepared as he should have been? What exactly did he do? What did he not do? Why are we in such a bad situation? We go back to the beginning. You got to look at people's motives. You have to look at the facts. So let's look at the facts first. Yes, according to the CDC and data compiled by the World Health Organization, we know that this virus originated in Wuhan. We know that there were recorded cases and cases being tracked as early, some reports are saying, as November 17, 2019. Now, according to the South China Morning Post, the government was tracking at least 266 cases. This also comes from unpublished government data that media outlets were able to get their hands on over there. So they were tracking these cases. We know that it was spreading within the Wuhan medical community, but we also know that there was a deliberate effort on the Chinese government's part to suppress information from getting out to the public. Even though South China Morning Post says that there was a case as early as November 17th. The first recorded case reported to WHO, or the World Health Organization, by the Chinese government was 8 December. So we're already seeing a little bit of a gap between when we know they knew there were cases and when they actually reported that there was an actual epidemic beginning. So that's already looking a little shady. 21 December, doctors in Wuhan begin to discover a surge of pneumonia-like cases within Wuhan. This is acknowledgement that there's some sickness going on here. On December 30th, a doctor within the Wuhan medical community, Dr. Li Wenliang, sent out a message to his cohorts and colleagues within the medical community, warning them of a SARS-like virus, urging them to take precautions against being infected. And he was worried so much about that he wanted to warn his colleagues lest they inadvertently become infected by this virus themselves. On 31 December, the Wuhan Medical Health Commission, they had some findings for their own investigation of what was going on there. And they said that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission, even though the doctors within that community were already saying that they had seen evidence of transmission between humans of this virus. Where is the disconnect? In fact, there were already 2 doctors suspected of having contracted the virus from treating patients that were infected with it. This is where the formal cover-up begins, is on January 1st, provincial authority calls in this Dr. Lee and accuses him of spreading rumors and basically inciting panic within Wuhan. They charge him with a misdemeanor and say, don't do this anymore, don't report on this virus anymore. And they tell the community at large, hey, if you have any samples or research that you're actively doing of this virus, yeah, we're going to need you to go ahead and destroy that and stop spreading any more misinformation. Wenliang makes a statement acknowledging his criminal behavior, the intimidation of doctors in Wuhan and laboratories and anybody doing research began in earnest. They wanted to shut down any dissemination of information that didn't step in line with what they wanted the rest of the world to not know. So then they took this a step farther to go beyond Wuhan, and the Chinese National Health Commission issues an order to all institutions who are doing research on the virus to cease and desist, transfer any samples they had, any research they had available to the government, or destroy it, and to not give out any more statements or information to any media outlets. They wanted the government to be the formal and official face of this and the state-run media would control anything that was released. This is where it goes beyond deception to where China began to be dishonest with the rest of the world. On January 8th, a commission of authorities from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States went to Wuhan to see what was going on, see if they could offer any assistance. And while they were there, the Chinese government and local authorities deliberately withheld information from them that proved that there was human-to-human transmission of the virus within the Wuhan medical community. They guided them along, only allowed them to see what they wanted them to see, and prevented them from finding out that, hey, yeah, there is transmission of this virus within the local medical community here, from patient to provider. And by doing that, they cut off the rest of the world and basically prevented the rest of the world from any preemptive preparation. Basically, the name of the game so far by the Chinese government was to deny that there was human-human transmission, and hey, we've got everything under control. In the meantime, the rest of us in the world are sitting there looking like, well, we can see there's a lot of sick people over here. Are you guys sure you have this under control? Because it doesn't look like you have it under control. Should we be worried? And in the meantime, China's like, nope, nothing to see here. We've got it all under control. No, the virus is not moving from person to person. There was a bat festival, and we're all eating bats. And everybody got sick. Yeah. I think if there was any fault on the rest of the world's part, it was believing China in the first place. We ought to know by now that you can't trust a communist regime. They're never going to be honest. They're isolationists by nature anyway. They hold all their cards very close, and they never really show their hand. January 20th, the virus leaves China, and there are confirmed cases elsewhere in the world, including the United States, South Korea, Japan, and Thailand. Now, the question is at this point, while we're still denying human-to-human transmission, is how did this virus get out of China? Did the bats leave? Was there bat soup on airplanes? You know why? The World Health Organization basically was falling in line with everything that China said at this point. The World Health Organization has been lockstep with China as far as denying and corroborating all of their claims that there was no human-to-human transmission. They didn't elevate the virus to an actual global health emergency until much later. And even then, they still didn't want to call it a pandemic because they claimed, we don't use that kind of language anymore. We have more updated terms. Well, here we are. And it's your fault. It wasn't until January 30th that the World Health Organization declared the virus a global health emergency, but they still did not call it a pandemic, claiming that they don't use that kind of language anymore. So at that point, basically everything else that the rest of the world could do was reactionary. Once it escaped the borders of China, because China had withheld pertinent information about the nature of the virus from the rest of the world, there is no way that anybody could have been prepared to deal with a virus as infectious as this. We are learning about this virus daily. And where are we getting this information? From our own research. Why? Because the Chinese government decided to destroy everything else that their own scientists within China had found out. Now, why would China do that? And why would the World Health Organization seemingly aid and abet their efforts to maintain absolute silence and media monopolization? Why would they knowingly and intentionally allow the rest of the world to be affected by the virus in such a way? If we skip ahead a little bit and we look at how the administration within the United States has had to deal with this, issuing a travel ban to China, which was largely reported as racially motivated, then banning visitors from the European continent. Everything has been to try and limit the insurgence of this virus into our borders. But even though we've done that, once the virus made it here, there was really nothing we could do except to formulate a game plan on our own because we did not have any scientific help from China. If they had been forthcoming, we would have been prepared. Things would not be so bad. We would be ahead of the curve. But because China, I wouldn't say dropped the ball, they basically spiked it on everybody else. If they hadn't done that, it wouldn't be so bad. Things in Italy, Spain, the United States, South Korea, Japan, and now it's spread into Africa. Basically, China, this is your fault. The rest of the world can lay all their grievances at your feet. Whether you care or not, it's your fault. Secretary of State Pompeo said that China's response, or a lack of, put the United States, and I'll say other countries, behind the curve to deal with the virus. Basically, at this point, what we're forced to do is not talk to each other, not be near each other. You isolate, you sequester yourselves away in your own homes, hide from the virus, wash your hands. Let's be frank. Their lack of transparency and deliberate and intentional cover-up of the early stages of the virus left the rest of the world with a target on its back for the virus to just sweep in and begin to infect helpless populations of people. My personal opinion is that China's motives behind the way that they handled this epidemic and now pandemic are more sinister than what anybody wants to believe. They criminally reprimanded and silenced and intimidated whistleblowers so that the rest of the world would never find out about what was going on. This has always been about China acting in its own interest. They have never been concerned with how the virus would affect the rest of the world. The only reason that they're swooping in to help other countries now is because it gives them an opportunity to push anti-US propaganda on these countries. That's basically what their help is contingent upon. Hey, we'll give you some supplies, but first, can we share a message with you about how bad the US is? China is not our friend. They're not our allies. They cannot be trusted. They will always act in the interest of the Chinese government. If I really have to get dark on what I truly believe this virus is about, I think it's a recon opportunity. It may not have started out that way. They realized early on that they could learn from this. What exactly could they learn? Well, think about it. You are the number 2 economy in the world, but your military prowess is never going to allow you to circumvent that number 2 spot just to get to number 1. But you've got to figure out if there's any way that you could possibly dethrone the giant. Invading the US mainland is not going to happen. Not right now. Not with your current military capability. Well, how do you do it? How do you invade the US mainland? How do you make the American economy inferior to yours? What army could you possibly use that could accomplish this task? Well, it would need to be an army that can resurrect itself, outpace its competitors faster than they can destroy it without being detected. It would need to be an army that has the capability of infiltrating and destroying U.S. assets economically. Well, what could possibly do this? Not an army of people. I do truly believe that this virus was a military tactic. The virus comes in, destabilizes the global economy, but you're not really focused on the entire international community. You're really just trying to bring down the big boys. Bring down America's economy, discredit the United States president, put the U.S. military in a position where they're not mission capable. The virus is basically that military strategy. Now, at this point, I don't think there's any immediate threat from China, but you better believe that they're taking notes on everything that they see the rest of the world doing. They want to see how quickly we were able to mobilize a response in order to start protecting ourselves against the virus. They're looking to see what changes we make as a society, or if we don't change, what are the weaknesses that present themselves before and after. This is the time to come together, not physically, keep 6 feet apart. This is the time to come together and be unified, to rally around our administration, to support our president, and to support the people who are on the front lines, the nurses, doctors, all the medical responders that are dealing with patients and the infected. We need to support them. But we also need to stop being afraid of this virus. The world will never be the same again. We need to make sure that the blame falls squarely on the shoulders that deserve it. And that is no one here. That is no one within the United States. Those people are in the Chinese government. Fear is going to continue to be heaped on your shoulders. Every time you turn on the news, every time you read another story about this virus and the situation that our country is in, you have to understand that you need to look to find what the goal of that story is. If the goal is to make you more scared, It's not helpful. If it's trying to give you information, that is what you should be looking for. If we're going to dig out of this hole faster, it's going to be coming from the people that help us to rally together. Be one of those people. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next time for more Freedom Logic.